and welcome to the panel on scaling remote teams. My name is Alexandra Ciobotaru. I am a product manager at Novoresume and the founder and host of Femme podcast. Today, I'm going to moderate this panel with three amazing speakers. And we're going to talk about growing a business remotely, what worked, what did not work, and what does the future hold. I prepared a short intro about each of our speakers, so without further ado, let me introduce you to Robin Daniels. Robin is the CMO of Matterport, virtual tour software platform that helps you digitize your building and automatically create 3D tours. Robin's responsibilities include all marketing, brand communication, and go-to-market initiatives to bring Matterport vision to life across all channels. Before joining Matterport, Robin was CMO at WeWork, and prior to that, he held leadership positions at LinkedIn, Salesforce, Box, and worked with many other startups. He recently moved back to Denmark. Welcome back, and welcome to TechBBQ.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Next up, we have Jenifer Klausoltormos Phd. She's the founder and CEO of Develop Diverse, a software platform aimed to increase team diversity through inclusive communication. In her career, she first leveraged technology to accelerate the process of finding new medicine. And after 10 years, her drive for gender balance and diversity brought her to use her tech expertise to accelerate closing the gender gap and diversity gap by founding Develop Diverse. For more than 4 years, Jenifer has been a researcher, speaker, and trainer in diversity and inclusion, and recently she was nominated as the Cartier Women's Initiative Fellow for 2021. Congratulations and welcome, Jenifer.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Jeff Aksengor. He joins us today as the Global Director of Growth at Podimo, an open podcast platform that offers personally curated recommendations to users while supporting creators through a brand new revenue share model. Jeff is passionate about growth and has helped startups and scale-ups on growth strategy for nearly a decade. He believes every company is different and thus the development must follow this rhythm. Jeff joins with many insights from scaling abroad while launching the product at the end of 2019. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, everyone, now we will start by doing a little bit of a reflection about the last year. So, impressions from last year. What was the setup for your growth strategy? And I want to start with you, Robin, because you joined Matterport completely remote.
I did.
And for everybody in the audience, Matterport IPO'd this summer, and this was the first time you met your colleagues when you flew to the US for this occasion.
It's true.
Congratulations on that. How was that year?
Well, first of all, damn, it feels good to be back live in person. This is the first event I've been at in nearly 2 years, and it just feels great. I did an event yesterday online. I kept thinking to myself, this kind of sucks. There's just no energy. It's great just being here with all of you, so thank you for inviting me. Second, nobody told me we were going to be on after the guy who invented Siri. I mean, that is a little bit crazy. That is a hard act to follow, but my God, what a great story he had. Thirdly, yes, so we did IPO this summer. So just a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in Denmark. You might not be able to tell from my accent. But when I was 21, I decided to buy a one-way ticket to California. That's over 20 years ago. Working at some great tech companies over in the Valley, some you never heard of that failed and some that succeeded. Long story short, I was previously CMO over at WeWork. And that went up, and then suddenly came crashing down. So I left, and I was talking to a bunch of companies. And I was going to take my time because it was kind of an intense ride, but I ended up taking a job at a company called Matterport. And that was in early March of last year that I accepted, but I didn't start until the end of March. And at the point that I started, everything had shut down. The whole global pandemic was raging around the world. So it was quite the weird way to start in a new company. I'd only met a few people in the executive team, the CEO, a couple of other executives. I'd not met a single person from my team. I'd not been in the office at all. So it was just a really weird way to start, to just be introduced over Zoom. Like, here's your new leader. Here's who you're going to be working with. Here's who's going to, set your strategies up and help grow the company. I was like, okay. And we always had a plan of going public, probably about 3 to 4 years, into that journey of me joining the company. But COVID, in the beginning, we all thought, what the hell is happening? Everyone went into protectionist mode. Let's try to protect our business as best as we can. But we quickly saw that actually COVID was a good thing for our business. We started seeing real acceleration in our company. And so we just started saying, let's put our foot on the gas and grow as fast as we can by really being aggressive with our go-to-market efforts. That led us to accelerating one of our early product releases, which was Matterport for iPhone. It was supposed to come out a year after I joined, but we said, this is the moment to release this because everybody is stuck at home. So we released that product a month into my tenure at Matterport. And in the first week of us launching that product, we saw 80,000 new subscribers, which was more than the first 10 years of being in business we saw. So it just had a huge effect on the growth of the company. But the biggest challenge was certainly like, how do you do all this when you're never in the same room? How do you foster creativity? How do you foster teamwork? How do you get everybody on the same page? It was a real challenge to do that. And of course, we had the great tools. We've got Slack, we've got Zoom, we've got all kinds of offline tools that we can use to communicate. But trying to replicate the creative energy that is in a room when you're really working on some gnarly problems, still have not found a way to replicate that. And so I would say the learnings, just to make a long story short, the learnings that we had initially is, yeah, you can really increase effectiveness. You can increase productivity tremendously because now everybody has a singular goal that they're focused on. And you can all like communicate on the status of those goals offline, and you can communicate, of course, during meetings. But decision making is something that we really had to learn how to optimize for, because of course, when you're all in the office, if you have decisions that are made, you can go over to somebody and pat them on the back and say, "Hey, can we decide something in the next 2 minutes?" Yes. Now everything has to be scheduled. It has to be a meeting. You have to get 10 people together. So we found that effectiveness and productivity went way up from our company perspective. But decision-making started slowing down. And we've since tried to rectify that, and I can talk about that later, but that's just some early learnings about how this remote work, you have to really start like balancing out the way that you think about decision-making in a company, because or else you can just keep kicking things down the road, and it's not very healthy for momentum, especially if you're in a growth business. So lots of learnings I'm happy to share today, but that's just some early ones. And again, thank you for hosting me here.
Thank you, Robin. We will deep dive into all of the did not work
yes.
parts. So feel free to also share your question on Slido on the barbecue stage, because we will take them at the end. Jenifer, your team scaled threefold in this pandemic, and you saw the second round of investment. Congrats. Tell us a bit more about how did you scale a company in a global pandemic? And for the record, the company is a small company. You are now 15 people, and you do have plans to expand even further. But how do you scale a small team?
Yes, so also to put into context, our company was started in mid-17, and our product was launched commercially in December 19. So 2020 was the beginning where we launched our product, and we started having great sales, and we were a team of 5. So a team with each of them having the responsibility of a whole department, right? And our product, briefly, is a software that actually helps companies optimize their, among other things, job descriptions to avoid that they are biased, so that they can attract a broader talent pool and especially diverse. So as you can imagine, we are within the recruitment sphere, which is the sphere that during COVID got slowed down. Either hires were frozen or they were minimized. So this was one of the tough moments where we saw that the great sales that we had in 2020, the first 2 months, or the first 3 months we launched the product, it kept increasing, but in a very steady way. And but the beauty of 2020 for us was that despite increasing slowly, we managed to get really big customers on board. Like Amazon, for instance. It was an amazing proof of concept, like where they show that they actually made a difference with our software. So we keep building our business, our proof of concept that our software actually makes a difference into companies. And we start acquiring Vestas, Danske Bank, huge companies in Denmark operating globally, and also other Europeans. So this helped us actually raise an angel investment round that allow us to increase the team threefold. So threefold sounds big, but we went obviously from 5 people to 15 people in 2020. So this brought us a lot of challenges based on we had to do it online, and sometimes whenever the situation would allow, we would meet a bit on the office, but we had to put in place things basic like Scrum. Our lead tech investor, who is actually here today, helped us set the Scrum, which would allow us to constantly follow up on the development, on the processes. We start using all the tools, leverage Zoom, Microsoft, having training our sales team, our tech team on the meetings, having one-on-ones with our team members that would help us ensure that, we have setting deliverables, timelines that would help us to see if things are progressing. And this, trying to get decisions made, which is very challenging instead. But all these processes that we put in place allow us to keep increasing steady up to now, where in 2021 we actually raised our VC, our first VC round, that is going to indeed allow us to increase twofold more. So we expect to be about 25, 30 people within the next 6 to 9 months. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jenifer. It's very interesting that you said you launched at the end of 2019, because that's exactly what happened with Podimo. And Jeff was very excited to talk about the growth journey of Podimo, because everything you planned as director of growth somehow changed in 2020, especially in February, March. So tell us a bit about that journey.
I think it did. And being a growth passionate and focused person, I'll start with some numbers. So a bit about Podimo. So today we're in Denmark, Norway, Spain, Germany, and out of the Spanish operation, we're running the full LATAM operations. And today we're 110 people, and we have more than 1,000 exclusive productions on the app, and thousands of top audiobooks on the shelf. And we've just added an engaging kids universe to the platform. So we're becoming this very family-focused platform with amazing audio. And back to your question, I mean, our reality is that we scaled the business and from 0 to 100 during the pandemic. Because I'd say, although we launched exactly 2 years ago, 2 years anniversary today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We went from probably 5 people on board to 100 in that first year, right? So I think you can say that the scale of Podimo happened during the pandemic. There was roughly a foundation in place once it hit us. So I think it's fair to say that everything we've done and everything we've scaled and learned has been fully throughout pandemic. So I think our growth strategy from the very beginning has pivoted to that. So I think this is the baseline. And that's also why I'm excited to talk about that today. But yeah, I mean, just to throw a few words on how I see our growth strategy, and that pivot helped us get to where we are today. I think if you think about it, what we do is we partner up with influencers, artists, media personalities, and what happened? Their calendars and schedules became very empty very quickly, right? So I think it made it easier for us to open some doors, right? And utilize that spare time they now had on their hands and unlocking a new channel. And I think, in hindsight, I link our growth with the ability to utilize that situation to the fullest.
So would you say that that's your reflection of what worked? The fact that out of a sudden you were really supplying a market that you didn't really know was there in the same extent as it became apparent in the beginning of the pandemic? Was that the main thing that you would say worked in terms of growing Podimo?
Well, I think a lot of things worked, right? I think we very quickly honed down on a structure that was all about learn fast, fail fast, move on, right? And I think I'm a growth person, so growth hacking is my bread and butter. I know it's extremely important to have that as part of your daily job, right? So I think kind of spreading that and getting that mindset under the skin of the team is extremely important, right? The ability to understand failing is learning. Failing is not negative, it's positive, right? But have the ability to fail fast and learn fast is really what gives you that iterative cycle that takes you forward. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. And Jenifer, what about you? What worked in the last year? What do you think was really detrimental to your success in scaling Develop Diverse?
The success was to was hiring the right people. I guess that's whenever you're in the very early stage, finding the right people I started as a solo founder, so even in early night 2020, I was still a solo founder. So it was very key for me to have on board 2 very strong co-founders that were holding the sales department and the tech side of the organization. So it was the very big key, find the right people that would help me then grow the team from that moment onwards, that could help me structure even more the processes, that could helped me define the strategy even in more detail so that we could move forward. It was very key for the success of the company, and that all the team members became fully involved in developing the culture, fully involved in learning as much as possible and helping each other and reaching out to each other and building that culture that was key to keep together and embrace the new ones whenever coming in.
And because you scaled a company from a sole founder to having co-founders and more employees, what do you think really made you succeed in doing that remotely? Because in this room, there are a lot of people who started startups exactly when the pandemic hit. Also because of the time that they had more on hand. Also because maybe they had some reflections about their current setup and they wanted to build something. What do you think worked for your development here?
So being remote, so I usually give lots of talks and speeches, and I will go to many meetings constantly, physically. So being able to move that online, being able to structure my work, and also actually sales going down. Like there was less work in sales because sales were going down. I could allocate my full effort on building the team and develop and reaching out to my network and making all these very well structured interviews so we could get the good ones. So getting free out of meetings because things were slowed down in our industry allow me to actually focus on growing the team and doing it the right way. I would say that was time.
Okay. A very good reflection. Thank you very much. And Robin, tell us what worked in scaling Matterport in the last years.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the question that you brought up before on mental health, I think, was something that certainly was on our mind. You know, when everybody just suddenly moved online to Zoom and suddenly your days was just packed with sitting in front of a screen for 8 to 10 hours, it felt like suddenly all of us had two jobs. We had our Zoom job and then we had our day job where we actually got shit done. And it was really hard. It was really taxing for people. So, certainly me as well, just starting out this new job. And after 2 months, I'm like, why am I so tired? Like, I usually have an abundance of energy. What is going on? And it is because you had this cognitive dissonance of sitting and just not having the real energy flow that you get from being with people in person. So we had to quickly modify and really encourage people to take breaks. We even started in the last summer, 2020, with what we called Summer Fridays, where we gave everyone Fridays off because people just were mentally exhausted. They liked what they did, they were being effective, but you can also just tell it was just wearing on them again because it felt like everyone had two jobs at that point in time. So we started with this thing called Summer Fridays because we learned that people just need some time off. And we've kept it going somewhat throughout the rest of the year with no meeting Fridays because, again, you can easily just pack everything in. And as people are trying to balance home life with work life, with your Zoom job and your day job and everything else, it became really, really mentally taxing. So we had to go in and say, we're going to encourage you to take breaks, speak to your manager, speak to me, speak to whoever you need to. And then we set up a buddy system as well, where we actually try to constantly encourage people to reach out to each other because we were starting to lose a little bit of that connectivity that makes us all human, which is the other big question, of course, it's on my mind and probably many of you is how do you maintain a culture when you live in a remote-first workplace? And it's certainly not an easy thing to do either. We started coming up with what's our philosophy for maintaining a culture, especially as we scale and as we grow and we're going through this hyper-growth journey that's going to take us to an IPO. And a couple of words that we came up with that were really core to us was, one, it was all about trust. Trust the team to do the right thing. Trust the team to get the work done. Number two was really around choice. Let people choose how and when they want to work. And number three is, of course, accountability. You can have trust and you can have choice if you're also accountable for the results that people bring in. And so it was really about, well, do we set up the goals in a way that people have clarity around what they're trying to achieve, and that we then trust people to just do the work when and how they need. You can work whatever hours you want, where you want. You can move to a different state, which many people did. They moved out of California to different states. I moved to Denmark, as long as the work got done. Now, it worked to some extent, honestly. In some ways, it gave people the air cover and the mind, the psychological support that I could do what's best for my life. Now, the reality is, of course, it's also hard because you do have a culture where meetings are a big part of how you get shit done. You have to meet with people. You have to meet with your stakeholders, your colleagues. So moving, too far away from the core also presented challenges. Like, for example, me, I live in Denmark now. And the 9-hour time difference between myself and my team in California, or my executive team in California, is nearly impossible to bridge. And so we started learning that, yes, you can tell your team you have the freedom, you have the choice to do what's right for you, but you also have some limitations in terms of like how you set up your life because there is responsibilities that you have to the company. And if you can't meet those, then maybe it's not the right place for you to be. We also learned that now that things were starting to open up again, and we'd actually started getting rid of most of our offices because we said, well, let's have a better way of actually encouraging people to get together. So we signed up to WeWorks, global network of 800 spaces around the world. And we said to every Matterport employee, you're going to get an access pass to a WeWork space. So you can go in, if you don't have the space at home, you can go in there and you can work, you can have an office, you can have an environment, you can meet with your colleagues. And it really helped people. It actually helped in our recruiting efforts a lot because suddenly it wasn't just, I have to sit in front of a computer for the rest of my life, which is not super attractive to a lot of people. So it helped, especially with recruiting, I would say, the younger generation. Because the younger generation, they want to go into an office, they want to be social, they want to have a life through their work. And it really helped in our recruiting efforts versus I would say, a little bit more senior, older generation who have family and kids. Like, I don't have the same need to be social and go into an office every day. So we started actually tailoring our programs and our culture much more to who you were and what you needed out of the company. And it's worked really well. Now, I wouldn't say it's been completely smooth. It's still hard to bridge that gap, but I feel like we're trying to do all the right things that are really based on those three things, which is about trust and choice and accountability.
Perfect. And one of my questions was around how do you build a healthy culture? Yeah. And you've definitely taken that as a step one in growing and scaling Matterport. What about you, Jenifer? What do you think really made successful the culture at Develop Diverse?
Yes. First, we would like to define what is a healthy culture for us. For us, it's a space where people are constructive and respectful, where we build a safe environment where people can be themselves so that there's space for speaking up, and then they can influence the company themselves. And how to reach that, that's a challenging one. I always say it's easier to be a typical boss where you just tell them what to do that actually embrace ownership and embrace people's just being themselves and telling you what's the best way of doing things. So for that, we saw the need of having, even for the very beginning, having one-on-ones with every single team member. So still as of today, I meet every single person once a month for ensuring they are feeling well, they are feeling motivated, and they feel that they are progressing. So not talking about operations at all. Mm-hmm. I also have the one-on-one with the management team where we together find out are the internal processes the right way so that people have the right definition of deliverables and timelines so that they can be owners of their own work. That's a work in progress. That's a tough one. We still have not cracked the code, I have to say. It requires a lot of effort to define every process. We also, and this came also from the team, build different channels in Teams, in Microsoft Teams. So we have channels, everything it was all organically grew for sharing your pets, some memes that make your day, celebrating the day that was there, having a coffee corner where the people could ping in and ask for a coffee, or even a help, like a check-in space where you could say, today I would really benefit from talking to somebody on one-on-one. We obviously also had to move on, or we also have fun activities online. I believe many companies have done that, making sure that you can get to know each other. Because if you don't know each other, you will not reach out. You will not speak up. You will feel you do not know them. You don't have the right environment. Oh. So we tried to build these activities. That was also the team organically did it, where we could find out about ourselves, sharing about our own culture. We are actually 10 different nationalities in our company. And so people from different places, and we know diversity to thrive needs to have inclusion. So we have a strong focus on including everybody's culture and identity in the organization. So having this in place where there was a space for that was very important because we couldn't do it ourselves on the physically speaking. And trying to adapt to people's needs as much as possible. So listening them out a lot.
The power of those one-on-ones can't be underestimated. It's really how you bridge the gap and you start connecting with people on a much more, I think, deeper level. And you can actually connect with people that you don't normally talk to in an organization, which I think is really powerful. Because a lot of times, the introverts will keep to themselves and you won't get this as much interaction. Zoom or Google Hangouts, whatever you use, has kind of leveled the playing field in some way. You can really connect much more meaningfully, talk about their life and who they are, their aspirations, and certainly their work as well. But the flip side of Zoom is on team meetings, it feels like it's weird when I have a team of 30 people and you're talking and there's just no feedback. So I feel like the team meetings are not particularly healthy, like in terms of they're not joyful in the same way team meetings used to be, but the one-on-ones are really meaningful because suddenly you can connect in a much more, you're just focused on that person. So it's an interesting, how the future is shaping out to be. And those one-on-ones, it's just like, I do as many as I can as well. Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Jeff? What can you tell us about the culture at Podimo?
So I think what you guys said, and I think it's really, really important to take a step back and evaluate how can we mimic the pre-pandemic culture or state of the nation, right? And we did that, I think, right? But everything from very specific initiatives like having a Friday bar, obviously a digital one or a virtual one, right? Where everyone could call in and it's fine to have a buzz going on or have kids and dogs running in the background. Doesn't matter, right? Just be there. And we've seen people just logging in and be there for hours, just cooking, right? Talking and cooking dinner, or at some point actually put the kids to sleep and then just muted. That was pretty cool. And I think that's what's needed, right? To kind of have that outlet, which all of a sudden creates this huge barrier with a screen and no feedback, as you said, right? So that's on the very tangible and the more culture, I'd say, part of it. Just try to mimic the day-to-day life through the options you have, right? On the business side, I'd say on the more efficiency and you can say growth side of it, I think what's really important is to get or enforce the feeling of togetherness. And how can you do that? Well, for us, several things. One of them was sprints. Sprints worked really well for us. And the good about sprints is that you can create squads from all the teams out there and give them a sense of belonging in that big sprint, right? So editorials, who usually never think about KPIs and commercial stuff, they all of a sudden had to look at what was the consumption patterns of the content they produced. So really engage them into that process and get them to feel, okay, wow, I'm contributing to something that has a direct impact on the revenue, etc. And I think the beauty of sprints is that it's easy to define those topics and KPIs, and it's easy to show the impact of the work you're doing. So we've been doing that since the day one, more or less. And in the beginning, it was a big mess, right? And I think, just a side note on the culture, it all sounds amazing. However, in the beginning, it was really inefficient. Why? Because we decided to be very agile and a very flat, from an org chart point of view, type of organization. Growing that fast, maintaining a culture, and having those sprint-focused roadmaps creates a sense of that everyone's responsible, but no one is accountable.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, what does it mean? Well, who is in charge of gathering the learnings, conducting the learnings, getting that into a playbook, into a strategy, communicating that out? No one, but everyone feels like they have to, and that creates a bit of a friction. So first two big sprints failed miserably, but as we improved, as we iterated, as we saw, okay, this is actually the culprit, we were able to do that much more successfully. So I think sprints certainly helped us. And I think it's really important to have that balance of accountability, yet really be focused on breaking the silos. Because the silos become much more prominent when you're behind a screen, right? Because there's no water cooler chat, there's no Friday bar conversation where you don't have to, but you just explain what your roadmap is to a person from a different team, right? And the priorities and learnings, that's just not really happening when you're behind the screen.
Yeah.
So I think it's extremely important to be focused on that as well.
Yeah. A very good takeaway. And I would like to take some of the questions that we're receiving. We have around 5 minutes, and I would love to take 1 or 2 questions. One of them is, what surprised you about scaling remotely, positively or negatively?
I can start. I think you have to suddenly over-communicate. I can't stress this enough. Communicate. In the absence of information, people make up their own stories. So you have to communicate more than you think until you're blue in the face of this. Because
Agree.
especially in a company like Podimo, we're just going through hypergrowth, doubling the team year over year. We doubled our company in the last 18 months that I've been there. And you can't assume that the people who joined recently will know exactly what they need to focus on, what your priorities are, what your purpose is. So you just have to over-communicate. In every team meeting, here's our purpose, here's our top priorities, and here's how we're going to organize the company around it. So you got to over-communicate, or else people will not have that sense of belonging, which is, I think, the ultimate thing that's a challenge in this remote world is all of us here, me included, we go in these crazy startup journeys where we work our ass off, we work crazy hours because we feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to have an impact in the world. We want to have fun while we're doing it. And the worst thing I think that's happened, the downside of this pandemic and this Zoom world that we're now living in is many people now just feel like it's a job. And the way you create a band of brothers kind of mentality where everyone's in it together is that you have a shared purpose, a shared goal, and a common thing that you're going after, which is why the communication is so important. Over-communicate. What are we trying to ultimately achieve in the world? And here's how we're going to go do it. Now, are you in or are you out? It can't be overstated enough that you have to communicate that time and time again. That's how you create that massive momentum for your team and for your company.
Perfect. Jenifer, what do you think?
I totally agree. I would like to emphasize, it has been shared here just before as well, which is very related to that. But the big challenge is, indeed, make everybody work toward the same goal. And the newcomers, they come and they just don't necessarily have this feeling yet. So how do you keep building it? And for us, having for instance, monthly meetings where we have been sharing the actual goals and the actual, what we achieved. We didn't achieve, actually. We're still far away from the sales we actually indeed had before. This helps people understand. And also the management team sharing, like every department, not only the everyday things, but rather also management-wise. How is investment going? How is the runway going? Being fully transparent on what's going on. But the most important that we are still working on it as we are now growing and we need to make it more structured is what very much about making the accountability that it has been mentioned here, because everybody is involved in everything, but who is actually taking that lead? And this will make that processes get lost. Deliverables are not happening, timelines are not achieved. So how do you bring this across? And that's the most difficult and the most important. And I think the key, and that's what we are working hard on, is defining internal processes and defining who is accountable for what are the exact deliverables, not assume what it is going to be a deliverable, and hopefully in the best case also set certain level of timelines. And that's the toughest one, I would say.
Thank you, Jenifer. Jeff?
Right, I'll just recap, I guess. So getting the right team in place fast, making sure you're breaking the silos, right? Then over-communicate, definitely agree on that one. Strong ownership structure and very clear targets. That would be my kind of top 5 prio.
Perfect. Before we close, 1 minute. Future. What does the future hold for scaling remote teams? Robin.
I think it's very much a hybrid, flexible future where you have the freedom and choice to choose how and when you want to work. Now, I don't think it's going to be all remote. I don't think it's going to be all in person. I think it's going to be a mix of the two. I think for sure what I'm seeing, and also from my colleagues in Silicon Valley, is people still want to get together, and it is more effective for certain things. But you also want to give people the choice to actually optimize their life. As long as you can optimize your life and you can optimize your output for work, that's the perfect harmony that everyone's working towards right now. And that feels to me like a flexible future of hybrid work.
Thank you. Do you agree, Jenifer?
Yes, I agree. I think it's important not to think one fits all. So it's important to understand what everybody's needs are and try to adapt as much as possible. It's difficult to go fully individual, I believe, but trying to capture everybody's needs rather than the full of them.
And lastly, Jeff,
Right.
you have the last word.
Sure. So 2 things. I think it's extremely important to find the best way of getting of finding a way to get the best out of the situation, right? That's number 1. And number 2, I think it's extremely important that you get I mean, yeah, no, I think that was my main point. That was really my main point. Get the best out of the situation is extremely important.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was our panel. Thank you so much for listening to us, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very
Enjoy
much.
the rest of the event.